My boss came down to my basement shop at 6 on a Friday, waited until the last electrician left, and set her house keys on my workbench, her actual house keys, on a worn brass ring, and said quietly, "The AC broke. I don't trust anyone but you." I looked at the keys, then at her. Margot Vale, CEO of Vale Systems, the company whose name was on my paycheck and on half the building automation panels in this city, was standing in my shop at the end of the week looking like a woman running on fumes and willpower, dark circles under her eyes that concealer had surrendered to somewhere around Wednesday, and she just handed the keys to her home to the guy who fixes the office air conditioning. "Ms. Vale," I said carefully, "we have a residential division. We have dealers. You could have a factory crew at your house in—" I know what I could have. Something moved behind the exhaustion, something that had been holding a door shut for a long time. "Tonight, if you can, Gabe, time and a half, my personal card, whatever's right," and she was already turning to go, and the last part came out level and rehearsed, which is how I knew it was the real reason she'd come down. "When you're there, check everything. Not just the AC. Everything." She said the word twice, the second time slower, and looked at me for one extra second when she said it. The way you underline something you can't afford to have missed but can't afford to explain. 11 years working under Margot Vale, and I'd never once seen her repeat herself. She was the most economical communicator in the building, a woman who could kill a bad proposal with a raised eyebrow, so the repetition landed on me like a dropped tool in a quiet room. Check everything. Not a request about a thermostat. A woman handing a locksmith more than a lock. Then she was gone up the stairs, and I was standing in my shop holding the keys to my boss's house. And the strangest work order of my career. Everything. I should tell you who I am in this story, and it'll take one paragraph, because I'm not complicated. Gabe Sutton, Senior Facilities Tech, 11 years at Vale Systems. I keep the headquarters of a smart building company running, which is a joke I make daily, because my personal religion is analog. I trust copper, gravity, and things I can bolt down. I log everything. Every work order closed with notes, every part, every reading, 11 years of it. Because my dad ran boilers for a school district and taught me that a tech's logbook is the only thing standing between "it's fine" and "it's fine because." People at Vale think I'm thorough. What I am is my father's son. Margot Vale's house was 20 minutes up the ridge, her father's house before her. Edwin Vale built the company and then built this glass and cedar place wired with every product the company ever shipped. A founder's showroom. I let myself in at 8 feeling like a burglar with permission, found the thermostat, and got to work on the broken AC. Here's what I found by 9 o'clock, and I want to walk you through it the way I walked through it, because the order matters. First, nothing was broken. Compressor, healthy. Refrigerant, dead on. Airflow, textbook. A 5-year-old system in better shape than most 2-year-olds. The house was 81 degrees and climbing because the system was being told to do that, and when I pulled up the controller to see who was telling it, the schedule read normal. Sensible set points, sensible times, nothing wrong. Except, my analog religion has one commandment: machines don't lie, but screens summarize. So instead of trusting the schedule page, I pulled the controller's raw event log, and the log only went back 4 days. A system like that stores months. Someone had it set to purge on a rolling basis, which is not a factory default, which is not a homeowner setting, which is a housekeeping choice made by someone who understood logs. And in those 4 surviving days, buried in the timestamps, I found it. Every night, at 2:50 a.m., the system quietly stepped the heat on. The heat, in summer, ran the bedroom zone up 8 degrees over 50 minutes, and then at 3:40 a.m., stepped it back down, and erased its tracks into the purge. A sawtooth. Silent, repeatable, gone by morning. Whoever slept in that bedroom would surface out of deep sleep at 3 in the morning, soaked and disoriented, night after night after night, in a house that would swear on any screen you checked that nothing had happened. And then I found the account. Every smart system keeps an access roster, and this one had the usual suspects: homeowner, factory service, and one more. SVC SBC NT2, admin privileges, created 14 months ago, last active that morning. A ghost with keys to everything, hiding in the one place nobody ever looks, the maintenance roster, where a name like that reads as furniture. I sat back on my heels on Margot Vale's utility room floor and 11 years of boring integrity reorganized themselves into a single cold sentence. And then I called her, and she answered on the first ring like she'd been holding the phone, and I said, "Ms. Vale, you need to come home. The AC isn't broken." I looked at the sawtooth on the log. It's employed. She was there in 25 minutes. She stood in her own kitchen in Friday's suit while I laid it out on the counter. The healthy compressor, the purge setting, the 250 sawtooth, the ghost admin, and I watched Margot Vale, who I had seen stare down union negotiations and a factory fire, put one hand flat on her own counter like she needed to confirm the granite was real, and her eyes went wet with absolute fury, and something that took me a second to identify, because you don't often see it in daylight. Relief. "Say the middle part again," she said. "The schedule. 250 to 340 every night. 8 degrees, bedroom zone, then reset and purge. Miss Vale. Margot. If you're going to be the man who proves I'm not losing my mind, you're going to use my first name." She let out a breath that shook at the edges. "Gabe, for 5 months, things have happened in this house that I stopped telling people about, because of how they looked at me when I did. I wake up at 3 a.m. every night, drenched, heart pounding, and the thermostat says 69, and the history says 69, and my doctor says stress, and my brother says," her jaw locked on the word brother, "first appearance, noted and filed. Everyone says it's grief, or burnout, or a lot for one person. Lights I turned off. On. My garage door open at dawn and the log says it never moved. My calendar dropping meetings I know I confirmed. Emails in my sent folder. Gabe, board emails, 3 a.m. emails, in my voice, almost, that I have no memory of writing. 5 months. Do you understand what it does to a person when every screen in her life politely disagrees with her memory? I run a company that automates buildings, and I could not prove my own bedroom was lying to me. I had started, her voice dropped to the flat register people save for the thing they've never said aloud. I had started keeping notes on myself, testing myself, in case they were right. The kitchen was quiet. Up the hall, the vents breathed like nothing had ever happened, the way they'd been paid to. "They're not right," I said. "Machines don't gaslight, Margot. People with passwords do. Your house isn't haunted, and you aren't sick." I turned the laptop so the sawtooth faced her. 90 nights of it implied in 4 days of survivors. "Your house is administered, and come Monday I'm going to find out by whom. Because whoever built this didn't make a mistake yet, but they made one Friday at 6 o'clock. She looked up. "They left the AC running hot on a day you'd finally had enough. They made you hand me the keys." I didn't sleep, and I wanted on the record that I spent the night the way my father would have. With the raw data, not the summary. Margot forwarded me read access to the house system from her own admin account, and I spent until 4 a.m. learning SVC Mate 2, the way you learn an animal from its tracks. It never logged in from the house. It came in remotely, always through the company's own dealer portal, the same portal Vale Systems Service Network uses to support 10,000 installations, which meant, coldly, that whoever ran it had legitimate credentials to the company I worked for. Not a burglar, an insider, someone with a badge. And the sawtooth wasn't the half of it. Once I knew what SVC Mate 2 touched, the 5 months came into focus like a photograph in a tray. It had access to the whole estate. Locks, garage, lighting, the calendar bridge Margot used to sync her life, and this is the one that put frost on my spine at 3 a.m., the house's network gateway, through which her laptop, her email, her everything passed. The garage door at dawn, SVCSBANT2, testing whether she'd notice. The dropped meetings, calendar bridge, one confirmation quietly declined per week, just enough to make a busy woman look unreliable to her own board. The 3 a.m. emails in her voice, drafted from a session that wrote in on her authenticated gateway, sent, then pulled from view on her end but not on the recipient's. Someone wasn't just haunting Margot Vale's house. Someone was building a case, a slow, patient, admissible-looking case that the founder's daughter was unraveling. Erratic, forgetful, up at 3 in the morning firing off emails she'd deny in the boardroom. You don't heat a bedroom 8 degrees to hurt someone. You do it to exhaust them, because an exhausted woman makes the mistakes your case needs, and thanks you for the diagnosis of stress. Monday, I did the most dangerous thing my job allows. I acted normal. I filed a bland residential work order, thermostat recalibration, Vale residence, complete. Because whoever was watching would be watching the work order system too, and a boring closed ticket is the best camouflage a thorough man owns. Then I started pulling the thread where it was safe to pull. The dealer portal's own access logs, which I could see, because 11 years of being the guy who fixes everything means 11 years of accumulated read permissions nobody ever revoked. SVC Maint 2 had been created 14 months ago. The account that created it had been deleted, but creation events leave a shadow in the portal's provisioning log, a source terminal ID, and that terminal ID, when I matched it against the office asset registry on my lunch break with a sandwich I didn't eat, belonged to a workstation on the 3rd floor. Executive IT, the office that provisions credentials for the whole company. I was still looking at that when Margot's assistant, Priya, appeared at my basement door, pale, fast, closing it behind her, which she had never once done. She said if it was ever weird, come to you. Priya's hands were not steady. It's weird. 10 minutes ago, legal circulated a board packet for Thursday. There's an agenda item that wasn't there Friday. She turned her phone around. Item 7, discussion of executive fitness and interim leadership contingency, confidential. And attached to it, Gabe, a memo, documented pattern of erratic conduct, screenshots of 3 a.m. emails, a calendar reliability analysis, a note that Ms. Vale has declined wellness accommodations. It reads like a file, I said. 11 years of logbooks, I know a file when I see one. It reads like someone's been keeping records. Who circulated it? Priya looked at the phone like it might bite. Sponsoring board member, Julian Vale. She swallowed. Her brother. The brother. Second appearance. And this time the whole shape of it stood up in the room. Julian Vale, board member, Edwin's son, the sibling whose name locked Margot's jaw, and a Thursday board meeting, 4 days out, with an agenda item engineered to declare the founder's daughter unfit and install an interim hand on a company she'd spent 5 months being too exhausted to defend. The sawtooth had a purpose, and the purpose had a date. Priya, I said, standing, already reaching for the logbook instinct that had run my whole life. Does the company bylaw say what a fitness vote needs? Documentation, she whispered. A pattern, demonstrable and recent. She looked at me. It needs the emails to be real, Gabe. It needs the 3 a.m. behavior to be hers. Then we have 4 days, I said, to prove her bedroom's been writing them. Julian found me the next morning, which is how I knew we'd guessed right. You don't come down to the basement to see the AC guy unless the AC guy has become a variable. He came alone, no assistant, hands in his pockets, and he was warm in the exact way his memo wasn't, and he leaned in my shop doorway like a man admiring craftsmanship. Gabe Sutton. 11 years. My father used to say you were the only person in this building who actually knew where the bodies were buried, plumbing-wise. A friendly nod at my workbench, my logbooks, my whole analog life on shelves. I heard you did my sister a favor last week. The house call. He let that sit. Between us. And I say this because you clearly care about her. Margot's not well. Has been slipping for months. It's painful to watch, and it's the kind of thing that, if the wrong people started, investigating it, poking at systems, pulling logs, it could get twisted into something ugly and public, and that would hurt her worse than the illness does. Family handles family quietly. You understand quiet, Gabe. You've kept this building's secrets for a decade. He straightened off the doorframe, still smiling. Keep doing what you're good at. Fix what's broken, close the ticket, go home. There's a raise in facilities future for a man who stays in his lane. Genuinely. Take care of yourself. And he was gone. And I stood there understanding that I'd just been handed, in the gentlest possible language, both a bribe and a description of what happens to people who pull logs. He hadn't threatened me. He'd diagnosed me, the same way he'd diagnosed his sister. It was the single most useful thing he could have done, because a careful man who visits the basement to say, "Don't look," has just confirmed exactly where to look. I closed the ticket he wanted closed. Then I went and pulled the log he told me not to. That night, at the house, I told Margot everything I had and everything I feared, on paper, at the kitchen counter, because I'd already stopped trusting the air in that building. Julian's ghost had ears in the gateway, so we wrote instead of talked, two people passing a legal pad back and forth like teenagers, which under different stars would have been funny. She read Julian in my block letters and closed her eyes. I gave him the IT department, she wrote. Then, out loud, because some things you have to say with your voice. When Dad died, Julian wanted the CEO chair and the board gave it to me. Dad's letter, the succession plan, all of it pointed to me, and Julian smiled and congratulated me, and said let me run the systems side, then keep it in the family. I thought I was including him. I thought, she pressed the heel of her hand to her eye, I gave the man who wanted my chair the keys to every system that could prove I didn't deserve it, and then I spent 5 months apologizing to my own board for being tired. He counted on that, I wrote. The exhaustion isn't a side effect, it's the whole machine. A rested Margot fights the file. An exhausted one signs the wellness accommodation and calls it self-care. She looked at that sentence for a long time. Then she took the pen and wrote the thing that turned us from victims into something with teeth. So we let him think it's working, and we get proof he can't purge. That's the plan we built. Over 4 days, in a house we treated as bugged because it was. Rule 1. Change nothing he could see. Margot kept waking at 3, kept looking wrecked in meetings, This cost her, and I'll never forget watching her do it, letting the board see exactly the woman Julian's file described, because the moment she looked well, he'd know the AC guy had found the sawtooth. She performed her own decline. It was the bravest acting I've ever watched, done for an audience of 1 hidden admin. Rule 2. Mine. Fight the summary with the source. Everything Julian's campaign relied on lived in systems he controlled, or could purge. The house logs, the calendar bridge, the email view. So I went underneath all of it, to the layers a systems man forgets that a facilities man owns. The house's network gateway wrote a raw traffic log to a local flash chip, a diagnostic buffer, factory feature, no cloud, nothing Julian's remote account would think to wipe, because you'd have to be standing in the utility room holding a screwdriver to even know it existed. I wanted to watch it happen once, live, before I pulled the chip. A technician confirms the fault while it's faulting, or he's guessing. So Monday night I did the thing that still raises my pulse to describe. I sat in Margot's dark utility room from 2 a.m., with a laptop mirroring the gateway in real time, and Margot lay in her own bed upstairs pretending to sleep, both of us waiting for a ghost with a schedule. At 2:50:04 the screen woke. A remote session opened through SVC Maint 2. Someone, somewhere downhill, was awake and working, and I watched a heat command go to the bedroom zone, watched the set point climb, and heard, through the floor, the vents in Margot's room begin to breathe warm at 3 in the morning exactly the way they'd been breathing for 150 nights. I had my phone open on a text to her. It's happening now. It's real. It's him. She texted back one word from the bed above me, and I've kept the screenshot. Awake. Not scared. Awake, the word of a woman who has just watched her own sanity get exonerated by a thermostat. At 3:41 the session closed and the purge fired, and by any screen in that house nothing had occurred. I pulled the chip at 1 a.m. Tuesday and imaged it. It held 90 days. And in 90 days of raw gateway traffic, plain as a tide chart, were the sessions, every 2:50 a.m. heat command, and every 3:10 a.m. email send, each one tagged with the source, not Margot's laptop, never Margot's laptop, but a remote session tunneling in through SVC Maint 2 from an IP that resolved, when I traced it Wednesday with Priya covering my absence, to Julian Vale's home office. The emails in her voice had a return address, and it was a mile downhill from her bedroom. But raw logs are a technician's truth, not a boardroom's, and I knew the difference. Julian's whole strategy was that his paper looked official, and ours looked like a disgruntled tech's grievance. We needed a witness the board couldn't wave off. 2 of them, actually, and getting each one is its own scar. The first was the woman before me, Margot, going through 5 months of her own notes on herself, found a name she'd buried. Deborah Ruiz, the estate's original smart home installer, the tech who'd wired the house for Edwin and serviced it for years, retired abruptly 14 months ago, right when SVC Maint 2 was born. Margot had assumed Deborah quit. I drove out to a bungalow 2 towns over on Wednesday and found a sharp 70-year-old who took one look at my Vale Systems polo and said, "Took you people long enough." And then, over coffee she insisted on making, told me the 14-month-old story. Julian had come to her privately, asked her to add a maintenance account for remote diagnostics, and when she'd said that wasn't how estate security worked, wasn't authorized by the homeowner, he'd made her early retirement suddenly very attractive and very mandatory. "I knew it smelled wrong," Deborah said, hands tight around her mug. "I told myself it was family business. I've regretted it 14 months. I kept my commissioning file though, the original account roster, before he touched it. I keep everything. She slid a folder across the table, and I could have kissed her, because a tech who keeps everything is my entire species. That account was never authorized by Margot Vale. I'll sign that in blood. I got back to the office Wednesday evening to find Julian had made his move on me too, and it was quiet and surgical, and exactly his signature. My badge still worked. Firing me would be a flare, and he didn't send flares. But 11 years of accumulated read permissions, the ones that let me see the dealer portal and the asset registry and every log in the building, had been rationalized that afternoon in an IT access review, scoped down to role-appropriate facility systems only. On paper, routine hygiene. In effect, the AC guy could no longer see anything that mattered, 3 days before the meeting. And if I complained, I was the disgruntled tech overstepping his lane, which was the story he needed anyway. He'd found the thread and cut it at the wall. Except a facilities man doesn't live in the portal. He lives in the building. Everything I'd already pulled was imaged to a drive in my truck, offline. My father's habit. You never work off the live system, you work off the copy. And the one piece I still needed, the gateway flash chip, had never been on any network Julian could reach. It was a physical object in a utility room I had a physical key to, in a house whose owner had handed me the ring herself. Julian had locked the digital doors behind me, and never noticed I'd stopped using digital doors on day one. He revoked my access to the summaries I wrote on the legal pad that night, sliding it to Margot. She wrote back, "And you've been living in the sources since Friday." Then, underneath, smaller, "My father hired you for a reason. I'm starting to think he was the second smartest Vale, the second witness I didn't recruit." He recruited himself on Thursday morning, the day of the board meeting, and he did it by getting scared, which is the most dangerous thing a careful man's accomplice can do. His name was Kel, and he was the third-floor IT contractor whose workstation had provisioned SVC SBANT2, Julian's hands, essentially, the kid who'd typed what Julian dictated. He found me in the basement at 7 a.m. Thursday, gray-faced, because the night before Julian had told the IT contractors that an unauthorized internal actor had been probing executive systems and that anyone who'd touched maintenance provisioning should expect to be interviewed and should remember who authorized their work. Translation, which Kel understood perfectly. When this breaks, it breaks on you. Julian had built a second fall guy under the first. Kel had come to warn me, and, I think, to confess, and he stood in my shop holding his own laptop like it was radioactive, and said, "He had me set up the account. I've got the ticket." "It's assigned to me, Gabe, my name." I didn't know what it was for. He said executive convenience, remote support, I swear. And now he's telling everyone the leak's an inside job, and I'm the inside. He was 24. I know that number by now. The men who build these things always have a 24-year-old holding the ticket. "Kel," I said, "did you keep the original assignment ticket? The one with his verbal authorization in the notes?" He turned the laptop around. He had. Of course he had. Scared people and thorough people both keep receipts. They just sleep differently. Provisioning request, SVC S2 authorized verbally by J. Vale. Convenience access, homeowner notification. Deferred per requester. Deferred per requester. Julian had signed his own name to the decision not to tell his sister. In a ticket a frightened kid had preserved out of nothing but habit and dread. I had 4 days of work and it was all suddenly, terrifyingly ready. 6 hours before a board meeting designed to end Margot Vale. I laid it out on the workbench in the order my father taught me to build any case. From the physical up. Deborah's original roster proving the account was never authorized. Kel's ticket proving Julian ordered it and hid it. The gateway flash image proving every erratic act traced to Julian's home IP. The sawtooth proving the exhaustion was manufactured. And the board's own memo proving what it was all for. Analog to digital, hardware to motive, a chain no purge could reach because half of it had never been online. I called Margot. "It's built, it's clean, it's yours." A pause. "How do you want to walk in?" And Margot Vale, who had spent 5 months performing her own unraveling for the man who engineered it, said, in a voice I'd never heard her use, steady as a torque wrench, "I don't want to walk in, Gabe. I want him to finish, let him present the whole thing, every slide. Let him tell the board I'm unfit, in his own words, on the record, with the founder's portrait watching." I could hear her straighten. "And then, I want the facilities tech to knock on the boardroom door." The boardroom, Thursday, 2 p.m. I stood in the hallway outside with a folder and Deborah on one side of me and Kel on the other, and Priya at the door with her hand on the handle. and through the wood we listened to Julian Vale bury his sister with tremendous compassion. He was good. God, he was good. Grave, reluctant, a brother who'd hoped it wouldn't come to this. Walking 11 directors through 5 months of a woman coming apart. The emails, the missed commitments, the wellness accommodations she declined, the erratic hours. He never sneered. He grieved. He said the phrase protect the company and protect Margot so many times it stopped sounding like words. And Margot sat at the far end of that table and let him, wrecked and quiet and exactly as unwell as his file required, until he clicked to the final slide, recommended, interim leadership contingency, and asked the board for the vote, and said softly, "I'm sorry, Mar." Someone had to see it. That's when Priya opened the door. I don't have Margot's gift for performance, so I did the only thing I know how to do. I walked to the front of the room, and I built it for them exactly like a work order, from the physical up, in a flat facilities tech voice that 11 years had sanded of all drama. Gabe Sutton, Senior Facilities. Ms. Vale asked me to service her home AC last Friday. It wasn't broken. It was scheduled to raise her bedroom 8 degrees at 2:50 every morning and erase the record by 4. Slide. The sawtooth. This is the exhaustion Mr. Vale just described as symptoms. It has an on time. Slide the gateway image. These are the 3 a.m. emails you were shown. Here's where they were actually sent from. I let the IP resolve on the screen, Julian's home address rendering line by line in a room gone absolutely silent. Not her laptop, not her bedroom, his office. Slide. Deborah's roster, and Deborah herself, standing. The account that did all this was never authorized by the homeowner. The installer who was pressured to conceal it is standing right here. And Kel, gray but upright, the contractor whose name is on the ticket, assigned it, verbally, by the man presenting this file, is here too. It says, Homeowner Notification, Deferred per Requester. The requester signed his own name. Julian tried. Of course he tried. Men like him don't collapse, they pivot. And I watched him reach for it. The disgruntled technician angle. The clearly this employee has been manipulated. This is exactly the kind of paranoid narrative we're here to address. For about 15 seconds it even had a shape. And then Margot Vale stood up at the end of the table. Not wrecked anymore. Not performing. Just rested in the way you can finally be rested when the thing crushing you has a name in the room. And she didn't raise her voice, because she'd learned from watching him that the quiet part is the loud part. I look tired, Julian, she said, because for 5 months you've been reaching into my house at 3 in the morning. You didn't want to prove I was unfit. You needed to make me unfit, because the real me was always going to beat you at this table, so you rented my own bedroom to do the fighting you couldn't. She slid one page down the long table toward him. Kel's ticket, the deferred notification line ringed in red, the thorough man's flourish, and I'll admit I ringed it. You signed the part where you decided not to tell me. Everything else you can argue. That's your handwriting on the silence. She looked at the board, at 11 faces reorganizing 5 months of quiet doubt into one clear picture. I'm not asking for a vote on my fitness. I'm asking for one on his. They didn't vote at the table. Deborah's roster and Kel's ticket and a gateway image go to council and to people with subpoenas, not to a show of hands. And the actual unwinding took months. But Julian Vale left that boardroom on administrative suspension by 3 p.m., and the interim leadership contingency that met at 4 was about him. One director, a woman who'd known Edwin Vale for 30 years, stopped Margot in the hall afterward and said, and Margot told me this with her voice cracking, I doubted you at the last 3 meetings. I looked at you being tired and I thought the worst. I'm so sorry. And Margot said the thing I'll love her for forever. Don't apologize to me. The whole point was to make you doubt me. He was good at it. Just, next time someone looks like they're falling apart, ask what's doing it before you decide it's them. The forensic firm that imaged the gateway confirmed every session. The emails in Margot's voice carried his fingerprints all the way home. The DA's office found the whole thing extremely interesting because manufacturing a paper trail to seize control of a company turns out to have several names, and none of them are family business. Deborah got a consulting contract and the apology Vale Systems owed her for 14 months. Kel kept his job, because Margot said a scared 24-year-old who brings you the receipt at 7 a.m. is worth more than a comfortable one who never touched anything. And she was right. And he audits provisioning tickets now like a man doing penance, which is the best kind of auditor. And the AC. I fixed the AC, pulled SVC main 2, wiped the ghost, rebuilt the roster clean with exactly 2 names on it, and set the bedroom zone to a flat, honest 68 that no one downhill could touch. Margot slept 11 hours the first night. She told me that the way you tell someone a lab result came back clean. Here's the part I didn't plan. 2 weeks after the boardroom, Margot came down to my basement shop again, at 6 on a Friday, after the last electrician left. She didn't have a work order. She set something on my workbench, not house keys this time, a small brass key, a new one, on a ring by itself, and said, "This is to the front door I had rekeyed. New locks, new system, 2 names on the roster." She looked at me with none of the exhaustion left, just the thing that had been underneath it the whole time. "I told you I don't trust anyone but you. I want to say the part I couldn't say 5 months ago, when I was too tired to know the difference between trust and—" She stopped, started over, braver. "You were the only person who checked the log instead of my forehead. Everyone else looked at me to see if I was crazy. You looked at the machine. Do you know what that is, Gabe? To a woman nobody believed for 5 months, you made I trust you true before I even knew I meant it the other way." I looked at the key on the brass ring. 11 years of loving copper and gravity and things I can bolt down. And here was my whole analog heart on a workbench. And I said the truest sentence I own. I keep everything. Every log, every reading, 11 years. I picked up the key. I'm going to keep this too. And I'm going to want to talk to the woman who owns the door, not the roster. She smiled, the rested smile, the one Julian never got to see. "Dinner?" I said. "Somewhere with no thermostats I'm responsible for." She's rekeyed the house twice since, both times just to hand me the new one in the shop at 6 on a Friday. It's our bit now. I've stopped pretending I don't wait for it all week. Before you go, 2 questions, and I want real answers in the comments, because this whole story turned on one man deciding to check the machine instead of the person. First, if your boss, someone with every reason to call a professional crew, handed you their house keys and said, "I don't trust anyone but you," would you have taken the easy read and just fixed the AC? Or would you have heard the second sentence, the check everything, and gone looking? Be honest about whether you'd have pulled the raw log or trusted the screen, because most of us trust the screen, and that's exactly what this whole thing counted on. And second, the real one. Has there ever been a stretch of your life where every sign said you were the problem, forgetful, unreliable, a lot, and you started to believe it, until one person looked past you at the actual situation and said, "No, it's not you. Something here is wrong"? Who was that person? What did they see that everyone else, including you, had stopped checking? Tell me about them in the comments, because someone scrolling down there is waking up at 3 in the morning right now, certain they're losing it, and your story might be the one that makes them go check the log. If this one got under your skin the way it got under mine, subscribe. Because next week, I'm telling you about the welcome home banner my family hung the day I got back, and the reason the locks were already changed behind it.